Good morning or afternoon, depending on your time zone. We are so excited to have this next hour with you to discuss key strategies for a successful medical marketing program that can drive business growth and fast track your exit. We hope that we meet your expectations with today's agenda. Also, we'll have a live Q&A segment in this webinar, so please be sure to add any questions to the Q&A box as we go, and we'll take time to answer them live. Also, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please let us know via the Q&A box and our webinar admin will assist you. For your reference, we are recording this webinar and you'll get the slides and a link to the recording within the next couple of days. All right, we have a lot to cover, so let's dive right in. Let's level set really quickly. This webinar is for CEOs of medtech companies, particularly early stage ones, as well as marketing leaders from medtech companies. And these can range anywhere from startups to fully established brands. So if you meet this profile, you are in the right place. Now, who are we that are talking with you today? Well, I'm joined by our founder, Lisa Bixel. She has over 40 years experience in medical sales, marketing, and commercial leadership, and has been a part of 16 acquisitions and 6 IPOs through her career. She also just published a book, So You're Launching a Medical Device. That will be made available to you for free should you book a consultation call with us after this webinar, and it's also available for sale via Amazon. And I'm Lauren Dustman. I'm CEO of BMMG, and I have over a decade of experience as well, working with our clients to drive brand awareness, sales growth, and to position them strategically in the market, making them attractive for acquisition. And like Lisa, I've also had considerable experience with companies being acquired or going public throughout my career. Now, who is BMMG? Well, we are your outsourced medical marketing department. BMMG first began in 2014, and 11 years later, we are very proud to say that we've served over 100 medtech and biotech clients and supported more than 20 of them in accelerating their exit strategy. BMMG specializes in helping medical device and biotech companies strengthen their market presence, generate demand, and attract investors. With decades of experience, we deliver innovative and results-driven marketing strategies tailored specifically to your needs. Also, scrolling at the bottom of this slide are just some of the clients we've served in our 11-year history.
And Lauren, on this slide, I always like to just add that while we list our most active and current healthcare verticals on the slide, we actually work in about 6 other care areas and service lines as well, such as dermatology and OBGYN. So if you don't fit into one of those that are shown, don't worry, we've got that expertise.
Absolutely. And we have that full list on our website as well. All right. And also, we want to make sure you know that we understand you. We get that you are juggling too much with too few hands. Your goal is to sell your company, and maybe that's even before your first sale. You need funding and you're routinely pitching investors for clinical, operational, and commercial growth. And you would like to focus on your job, but you are making sales calls. You're setting up 10-foot trade show booths. It's not a good use of your time as a company leader and as somebody who needs to be really focused on the big picture and strategy. And we totally get that. Now, as we stated in our promotional materials, we believe that the must-haves that we'll cover today will absolutely help you accelerate your exit. The points we'll discuss involve building brand equity, driving sales growth, and boosting utilization. We've created this map of our journey together so you can follow along and see what we've covered and know what's coming next. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Lisa to talk about what acquiring companies value.
Thanks, Lauren. So on the screen here, the list that's shown is actually a resource we're going to make available to you after the webinar. So don't worry, this will be sent to you as well with the slides and the recording. The list of 10 items here, 3 of which highlighted because we're going to go deep into those, is actually more of a checklist of about 43 different bullet points. And really, it does serve as a great sort of punch list for you as you think about what do you need to do to shore up your organization and be all ready for any potential suitors that might be looking at you. For today, though, again, we're going to just concentrate on the first 3 because the 3 must-haves that we have highlighted and that we're going to be part of our discussion here all fit nicely together. So team and leadership, what do we mean by that? As you might imagine, it's really the expertise and experience of the founders and the key executives of the team, your track record, your ability to navigate regulatory, commercial, and clinical landscapes, and have success at doing so. So ability to, again, show that you've been there, you've done that, and this is something that is not foreign to you, and that you have been able to navigate it successfully. The other thing that's a part of this team and leadership section is the strength of the advisory board that you've selected and key opinion leaders, some of which might have been involved in the actual idea of your technology and the founding of your company. It's going to be important that you look at, or an acquiring company might look at, and that you have answers to why these people, what's their input, what's their influence, because not only is this acquiring company looking at who are these people, and that they are avid spokespeople about this topic, this disease state, this procedure, this technology, but also that as a user of it, that they are also very influential in getting their peers to also agree to try it and build that into their clinical pathway. So that's all part of this first section. Clinical evidence and efficacy, pretty, again, straightforward, but building that out a little bit, it's your clinical data, yes, what trials you did, the early on successes and the outcome, safety, efficacy, proven effective. But also what's the real world evidence as you've moved from, pre-commercial into commercial use? What are the users of your technology saying at the podium, posters, publications, et cetera? And then as more people are more vocal about your technology, it's natural that a patient, even if you're not direct to consumer focused, might catch wind of it by your website, by a friend of a friend, by something that was, aired on the 6 o'clock news, healthcare segment, et cetera, about the technology. They'll come to their physician, have a piece of paper from the website and say, am I appropriate for this technology? Is this procedure right for me? And so you want to make sure and stimulate that kind of interaction between patient and physician. So they might look at that too, an acquiring company. And then this third bucket, again, pretty obvious, it's the potential. What potential do you have? What's the viability of your commercial plan and story? So what's your market size? What's your growth potential? What's the competitive landscape? Do you have a solid story? And is the market nodding and saying, yes, we have an unmet need, and the standard of care has problems, and your technology seems to address those problems. Then we move into more practically the pricing of your technology. Is it, achieving that targeted MedTech 80% margin that is typically sought after, or exceeding it, which would be great. But, is, again, your pricing and your reimbursement all shored up. Reimbursement might not be wonderful right out of the gate. It takes time. It takes a plan, especially if you're going to have your own code, but you have a story, how you're going to get there. You have an alliance with maybe one consultant, a new hire, a team of consultants, whatever, that have outlined for you what, again, that reimbursement pathway is going to look like. So it doesn't have to be that you've solved it yet, but that you have a clear strategy on how to get there. And then again, real world, what's your sales revenues? Is it going well? Is it going as expected? Are your projections for forecasted sales for 18 months and 3 years and 5 years solid? Makes sense. It's cogent. Nobody would argue that it seems pie in the sky, nor is it underrated. So those are the types of things that we'll be hitting on today. Again, the must-haves tuck up nicely underneath them. Lauren?
Thank you, Lisa. Moving right along to our must-have number one, which is building brands. And that sounds simple and easy, right? But are you really looking at it the right way? Branding is so much more than just your company's name and logo. It's actually your reputation as well. And even drilling down from there, it's not just the external optics and how the outside world sees you, but how do you see yourself internally? So when we say you need to think about your reputation, again, it's not just the market, the physicians, the societies, that's all very important, but what is the climate inside your organization? Make sure that you don't check your brand focus at the door. Are the people within your team happy and united in the problem you're solving and your approach? A disgruntled internal team can be a huge problem. Now, again, Like we've said, some might dismiss brand building, building brand equity as just being mindful of your logo and its usage, but we recommend you think more holistically and check that box, yes, but also ensure that your team is harmonized and are cheerleaders for your organization, and that you're seen as an innovator, a thought leader, and a subject matter expert about the disease, procedure, or care area. With that being said, let's talk about what this actually requires from you. You'll need a favorable or neutral reputation in the market. You do not want any controversy regarding your team or your offering. You'll want to be gaining attention through your thought leadership, expertise, and insights on emerging technology in this disease space. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's white paper, blogs, podcasts, articles, even very thought out targeted social posts. But this definitely needs to be happening to establish your brand and build trust in the market. Also, if you're pursuing acquisition, make sure that you prioritize your product over your company brand, because that's what's going to endure ultimately. And then finally, and I cannot stress this enough, you need to ensure compliance. This is with healthcare regulations, data security, patents, liability, ISO, GMP, and manufacturing standards as well.
Lauren, I'd like to just add something here is that, your leadership team and founder likely met casually in the past, and you agreed that there was some gap in a particular procedure, and the standard of care had flaws. So what we're suggesting here among these is that you leverage that depth of knowledge about what's missing with the current treatment options and the clinical pathway, and how your technology specifically addresses that. As Lauren said, this is the time to build content and be prolific about white papers, blogs, social media posts, customer-facing communications of any kind that discuss what a new solution would look like. And in fact, this whole building of a market demand where there's people, kind of drumming their fingers going, I want this technology that's coming, even perhaps before you have launched. You want to build that kind of excitement, enthusiasm, and following. And we're going to make that a focus of its own webinar that we're going to cover on May 13th at 12 Eastern. So there'll be more information about that. But again, this is so juicy that it's got its own 1-hour program dedicated to it coming up on May 13th. Lauren?
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So now that we've talked about what this requires from you, we're going to share a real world example of success in brand building with one of our clients. Okay, so we've got a lot that we've talked about so far. We're just bringing it down into making it really real world. It's a case example that we want to share with you. So we had a gastroenterology client with an ablative technology for a precancerous condition, and they were early stage, getting by. Their head was down. They were just focusing day-to-day, just survival. And they knew that wasn't right. And what they needed to do instead was pause, raise up a level, think strategically, and get things in order. And so that's exactly what they did. They really focused on 3 key areas, which was their messaging, which they'd sort of developed ad hoc grassroots without any kind of market validation. They also weren't clearly communicating where they fit in against the standard of care, against the competition. Today, what you do for this particular patient, how does their new technology drop into that and play a role? That wasn't very well defined and articulated. And then they were also getting some sales objections in the field, and they wanted to build a program that would help to address each one of those. So what did they do? First of all, they were very diligent about all being the leadership team and the founders being on the same page about, what? Exit is what our primary goal is. Let's all focus on this. And to do so, we're going to have to do some painful things. So they did some house cleaning. They found people who were not on the same page, that had a different plan, a different thought about what the company should be doing, where they should be focusing, that they replaced those individuals. They built out a fresh new team
kept some of the people who were on the same page so that they had complete alignment internally. And as we mentioned, the branding, building brand has to be mindful first about your own house, getting your house in order and having everybody have a shared vision. So that was one of their first big efforts, was to just, again, get everybody unified, saying this is the right direction we're going and following along happily and in an agreement. The other thing that they wanted to do was to go back to their market and get some customer, voice of customer. They had assumed some things about their product name, just their branding, where they fit in, their technology. So they asked users, thought leaders, non-users, just, all of their network. They tried to get perspective so that when they went back to the market with shored up messaging, they said, hey, we talked with you, we spoke with you, and this is what you told us, and here's how now we're aligned. The other thing that was important for them too is that according to their approved indications, they needed to be able to articulate how does their technology fit in. They weren't a complete replacement for the primary method of ablative technology for this precancerous tissue. So they knew that. They weren't going to immediately replace the competition. That wasn't going to happen. So they needed to know, how do they complement it? Where does that fit in? So they got market feedback and they documented that, trained the sales team, and were unified in how they communicated that back to the market. And then one other thing that is pretty common, early stage company, is that they were told, hey, you don't have enough clinical data. Come back to me when you have more clinical data. Well, their clinical data wasn't like non-existent. They had some, but what they hadn't done really for the market and the sales process and the sales tool for the team was to document it all. So they scooped up every poster, every podium presentation, every published peer-reviewed journal article, and they documented on a clinical data summary page and showed all of the different places where they had been talked about publicly and data that was analyzed. And so they built that, put it in the hands of the sales team so that when someone said, show me more clinical data, they were able to provide that. And it did have some people go, oh, I didn't know you had as much as you do. Still need for more, but this is impressive. And that was helpful at continuing the dialogue with the customers. So all these things being done together over the course of about a 15-month window did help the company ultimately fast track to the point of being acquired after about, again, a 15-month span. Lauren?
Thanks, Lisa. That's a great case study. And just one other thing to note about the case studies we're going to go through today, we do even go a level further down on these, where we highlight the current state, the very specific action that was taken, and then the result of that action. Those are in the appendix slides, and those slides will be made available to you after the webinar. Okay, so in our webinar promotional materials, we spoke of helping you accelerate your exit. Whether it's 6, 12, 18, or 36 months, would you like to shorten that if you could? You should see a poll pop up on your screen. So if you could just take a few minutes to respond to that, we would greatly appreciate it. Okay, moving right along. We're going to go ahead and end that poll. We appreciate you guys taking the time to answer. Let's go ahead and proceed along our journey to must-have number 2. So now we're moving beyond building the infrastructure and a solid foundation that translates into brand equity. Now we're going to talk about driving sales, which is all about going from early adoption to a spike in sales and revenue. We need to do something that really shows the investor community and potential acquirers that people want your product and the solution that you offer. One thing we say all the time is sell the problem that you solve, not the product. And driving sales begins by understanding consumer behavior. Someone doesn't just buy your product to own it. Unless they're a member of your family, they want your product to solve some problem. So ensure that your messaging and activities reflect that understanding of the consumer and what solution you offer. So at this stage, you have FDA clearance, and you're tasked with proving to anyone who might be interested in you from an acquiring position that you know your company, your product has viability, and that it meets a truly unmet need in the market. And people are lining up and saying, hey, I want that. Your marketing program needs to be generating demand that fills the sales funnel. And whether it's trade shows, webinars, hands-on workshops, marketing is creating the opportunity for sales to occur. That is the number one goal of marketing. Create an environment where a sale can happen. So what does that require from you? You'll need early success and repeat business from existing customers. You'll need a clear and differentiated market message, which goes back to our must-have number one, all about branding. You'll want strong physician and patient adoption. You'll need a defined pricing strategy and reimbursement potential. And you'll need a balanced sales funnel with steady new prospects and smooth closures.
Lauren, on this slide, I don't have too many comments. Actually, I only have just this one, is that our webinar number one, the previous version of the same content, the Q&A session had people asking questions where some of this was explored further, answers to like, what is a balanced sales funnel? So I just want to make note that as part of the follow-up for this webinar number two, we will make available Q&A from this webinar as well as webinar number one. So there'll be a question and our response to that documented as part of the follow-up that we share.
Thank you, Lisa. And folks, again, as we're moving through, I know that we're covering a lot of content, particularly on these slides. So if we go too quickly over anything that really piques your interest or you want more information about, please let us know in the Q&A, and then we can follow up with you directly after the program. Okay, now that we've shared, oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just gonna say, I'm up again, right?
Take it away.
All right, so our second case study, again, making it real, bringing it down to real world application, is that we worked with a neurosciences client with a technology to eradicate brain tumors. They had gotten some early traction in the market. So again, some early successes. Maybe many of you can relate to that. But they needed to accelerate sales, so get more users using, and the users who use more. So yeah, their two KPIs were, let's get accelerate sales and revenues, so that we've got more people using it, as well as using it for all the approved indications by FDA standards of their labeling. So what did they do? So one of the first things that they did, because they had funding, actually a new infusion of capital, enabled them to expand their sales team and to focus on these two big areas that they thought, could be improved with the right resources. So the company began building their new sales team and getting them together and saying, hey, you're sales professionals, you've been at this before. What tools and programs have you had in your past that were truly successful? Wanting to make sure that they were bought into and committed to the use of the tools and the programs that were developed. And so the sales team were delighted to share some of their past successes and what were their opinions about the tools and the programs. And so the company responded. They're like, okay, then here's what our tools are going to look like, the new programs we're going to launch. And so by the time the sales team, that were, again, many of them new, were trained and had the right tools in their bag, they felt supported, they felt heard, that what they had to say about what programs would be successful will matter to the company, and they listened. And so they left headquarters trained, tools in the bag, and feeling like they were really part of something special because they were really energized and excited to feel this level of support. So checkbox number one, support the sales team with all the right tools and programs. The next thing that they did was they had early users, as we mentioned, so some success, but these users were islands. They really weren't talking to one another. And so the company took a hand at putting together what they called a network. So the company's network of users pulled these people who had been having some success out there, early adopters, some newly added users, and networked them to the point where they got together on calls, they got together in person for workshops, in meetings for planning and strategy, and to share interesting cases. So the physicians out there who were using the technology were no longer islands. They felt part of something special, part of this club, this network. And so that was very encouraging, and also helped utilization ultimately, because people were now sharing interesting cases and patient selection criteria and things. So that was positive in many levels. One of the things that were seen as an objection from the field was that, customers were saying, I need support with reimbursement. Reimbursement had moved from non-existent to, existing, but there were still a lot of other supporting elements that weren't in place. So the company aligned with a third party. It's one that we use regularly, Pinnacle Healthcare. And what they did was to rely on Pinnacle to put together a dossier of all of the clinical evidence, to craft strong letters of medical necessity, to have letters that were about initial claim submissions and denials. They had an appeal process with letters and documentation as well. So all of that got buttoned up, and the customer base was very happy to be able to call Pinnacle and ask for support and work through individual claims. And so that no longer was an objection. The other thing that was important was that, the sum total of all these things, by removing barriers, adding new users, getting the users to use the product more and for the appropriate indications, ultimately ended up having a more smooth funnel where there wasn't choke points as new customers were coming into the top. They were moving through to become converted users. And so all of that was positive. And within the course of about a year and some change, there was seen an 150% growth in the customer base. But more importantly, even the procedure volume tripled, which of course all led to improved revenues. So two of their KPIs were successfully checked off. Lauren?
Thank you, Lisa. And one other thing I know that we've talked about before with this client with the balanced sales funnel and shortening the sales cycles was that they'd implemented a headquarter visit as a part of their sales process.
Good point. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think I know you really pioneered that with them. Do you want to give just a couple more details?
Sure. Again, one of the things that, as Lauren mentioned, was key was that ultimately for the appropriate prospects that were in the funnel, if they did hang at a certain point in the funnel process, right, the sales cycle, they were pulled out and evaluated for would they be an appropriate customer to bring to headquarters, and maybe even not just the single physician, but the care team, in order to, talk about the roadmap, see how the product was made, to look at the new clinical trials that were underway, and basically, look behind the curtain and see what was going on and feel like they better understood the company and its direction. And as most all of us can attest, a headquarter visit is expensive to some degree, but not nearly as expensive as, the wasted effort on trying to move a customer from the funnel into an actual existing user. So it was highly successful with that level of care for a particular account as was needed. So yeah, it was very effective.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa.
Mhm.
All right, now before we hit on must-have number 3, we just wanted to ask you one more question, and are you interested in a discovery call for assistance with brand building, driving sales, and boosting utilization? You're going to see the poll up on the screen. Please take just a moment to answer it. And then also know that our webinar admin is putting the link to book a call with us in the chat. If you don't book a call with us and you answer yes, that's totally fine. Obviously, we would love you to, but if you don't go in during this webinar and follow that link, then we'll follow up with you directly after the program. Okay, moving right along to our last must-have of the program, and that is boosting utilization. So we've touched on this before in our must-have number 2, when we spoke of securing not just casual users of your technology, but those who are truly committed to a new clinical pathway. So let's just do a quick recap here. So far in our journey, an acquiring company can now look at you and say, okay, they look squeaky clean, all shored up. They have the right people, they have the right processes, they've grown considerably. And in the last 18 months or so, they've really grown in unit sales and revenues, but, and a big but, can they maintain it? Can they or you sustain that growth? Is there an opportunity beyond that first big flash that we saw? So that's what this section is all about. Utilization which sustains growth. To drive widespread adoption of a new medical technology, it is crucial to consistently and assertively reinforce its advantages over the existing standard of care, which I know we talked about in our must-have number 1. And this means clearly articulating the shortcomings of the current methods and demonstrating why the new solution is an absolutely necessary improvement. Also, beyond initial adoption, physicians must integrate the technology into their standard clinical pathways rather than just using it sporadically. We say this all the time with our clients. We don't want a one and done. We don't want, your product sitting in the closet and getting dust. And you can encourage your customers to integrate your product, your solution into their standard clinical pathways by creating a program around the utilization of your technology and providing co-marketing and educational content to all of your customer sites. Also, while early adopters absolutely play a key role, the real challenge lies in moving the broader market, so the mass middle, along the adoption curve, ensuring that new users not only adopt, but consistently utilize the technology is absolutely critical. And finally, leveraging real-world evidence is essential, as clinical trial data alone is often seen as too controlled. Physicians and stakeholders want to see proof that the technology performs just as well, if not better, in real-world settings. Showcasing positive outcomes and testimonials from existing users can really help influence broader adoption and solidify the technology's place in everyday clinical practice. Lisa and I say all the time that peer-to-peer selling is the most effective selling method. And we've seen that over and over again throughout the years with our clients.
Lauren, I just wanted to comment on the orange, whatever color, I don't know, mainstream user box. Because as many of us know, when you walk into a room full of clinicians, let's just say generically, whether it's nurses and PAs or NPs, physicians, et cetera, many whom might be researchers, many who could be thought leaders and come from academic institutions, and you ask, who would like to try my new medical technology? 10% of the room is going to have their hands go up. So, it's relatively easy, again, relative to the mass middle, to get those early adopters. It's more straightforward. But when it's coming to the point of getting that big mass moving forward and adopting your technology, it can be a little challenging because they're going to be very vocal about wanting to see tons of clinical data, make sure that all their colleagues are using this technology because, again, they might move together. That's why a bell curve is as it is. They move together as a mass, and not many of them, only some of the early adopters don't mind being a pioneer out there by themselves. Otherwise, they want to look left and right and go, yeah, I'm not the only one using this. We're all using it together. And so it's kind of this new standard. So they want to move together along that utilization curve. So it's important that, again, you realize the difficulty with this mass middle. It's not for the faint and weak of heart. It's absolutely important to make sure that you've got, again, clinical evidence, that your user base is strong, that your reimbursement story is solid, et cetera, because that will be what's required for this big, movement in terms of a big spike in growth of your sales. Lauren?
Thank you, Lisa. That's a great addition. All right. With all that being said, let's talk about what it requires from you. And that's a strong understanding of your customer base with sophisticated analytics from your CRM. And I'm actually going to stop right here. I think a lot of people, when we say analytics from your CRM, they think about, different marketing analytics, ROI, that type of thing. And that's not what we're talking about here. So Lisa, can you just expand on this point a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of points to mention here. So first being a strong understanding of your customer base. it's important to know and really truly know. Don't think you know, don't assume, don't guess, but actually ask your customers, hey, and ask of your casual users, your avid users, your non-users, what keeps you from using our technology or using it to its fullest, appropriate for our approved indications. So don't guess, but actually get voice of customer and then develop a game plan to address those obstacles. It's important, and you'll be evaluated in like a due diligence effort that would say, tell me about your customer base. Who's using, who's not, why are they using, why aren't they using? And this is for you to be able to button that up. Then the other piece is the CRM. Again, the tool itself isn't so important. Yes, Salesforce.com is probably the go-to for everybody. Early stage companies tend to think it's too expensive, but it doesn't have to be. Just there are ways to make that more affordable. But again, this is not a prompt about use Salesforce or HubSpot or Dynamics. The tool is irrelevant for what I'm going to say, which is make sure that knowledge base of who's using, how much they're using, are they trending upward, downward, et cetera? Are they a dead account? It's inactive. And you have that intelligence available somewhere and can speak to it. Again, that'll be a measure of the due diligence from an acquiring company, interested in your command of your user base and the market understanding. So those are going to be very important. Lauren?
Thank you, Lisa. You'll want frequent posters, papers, and podium presentations about your technology, which I know we, discussed back in must-have 1 and must-have 2. This is a theme that goes through every single one of these must-haves and is very important. You'll want insights about how your technology may find its way onto societal guidelines. And this is actually a question that we get from a ton of our clients, because they can't seem to understand what the appropriate way to go about this is. So Lisa, can you share just a little bit more about the societal guidelines?
Sure. It's a touchy situation because, as we know, societal guidelines are highly influential and can be a tipping point for you and your technology, yet you have very little control over it on the one hand. So again, we know that members of a guidelines committee are really kind of sealed off from industry influence, as they should be. We shouldn't be able to influence them, nor should the competitors be able to do that. But they are users. They are actively practicing users in the market, not necessarily of your technology, but they are representative of their peers and the disease state and again, the clinical care pathway. So you can certainly approach them and not try to influence them, but to say, we're a new technology. We know we want to fit in here. That's where it makes sense. What's required for us to be on the docket for the next level of guidelines that are going to be revisited in a year from now or 2 years from now? What's it take for us to be a topic? And so you can ask them, they'll tell you, and by virtue of you asking them, telling you, you'll have sort of an outline, a checklist of things that need to happen. So that will be important. Now, of course, the biggest driver will be that your technology has widespread use. So, by virtue of your widespread use, they have to address your technology when they write guidelines, if every doctor out there is using it or the majority are. So, you can influence it somewhat by just, again, your technology adoption, but it's okay to just ask what are the milestones that you would need to evaluate us against in order to make us part of the guidelines going forward. And again, have this story in your hip pocket, be able to spell or to tell that to any acquiring entity so that you can explain, again, your pathway. Lauren?
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And then finally, you'll need a compliant and strategic cooperative marketing and education effort. All right. Do you have anything else? Do we want to go into the cooperative marketing at all?
You can. I know that was a question from the first webinar, a little bit more detail about cooperative marketing. What does that look like? Actually, I think that it makes sense. Lauren, do you want to, I know that's one of your babies. Do you want to talk about that?
I do love some good cooperative marketing. So, boosting utilization is so important. And so when we are working with customers, it's the understanding that the onus is on the medical device manufacturer to provide these facilities, these HCPs with the tools to educate the market about this new disruptive technology. So we can do this with several different things. Number one is providing these facilities, your customers, with a strategy on how to successfully launch a program around your medical device, around your medical capital. If we can position it that way, where we're thinking about it as a holistic program, not just a one and done type of thing, and then give them a good foundation with stepping stones on how to effectively launch this program, that's going to be huge. Another thing that we always want to make sure we're doing is providing appropriate content for them to push out with, thinking about the FDA clearance, what's stipulated in your 510(k). And this is providing, digital tools, patient flyers, referring physician information, things for PR, social media, just a really holistic package of approved and compliant sales tools that they can then use to educate patients, referring physicians, and just the broader market as well. Another thing, just to make sure that they're utilizing these tools effectively, that they feel like they have everything they need in their toolbox, is to establish a QBR with your customers as well. That's going to make a big difference. All
Great.
right. Thank you. All right. I'm going to move on here to talk about the real world results.
Okay, so our third and final case study, again, bringing it home for a specific customer, all these things we're talking about. So this company made a temperature control solution as an adjunct to a cardiology procedure. The customer base was strong and growing, again, very good things, but the death sentence, they had utilization struggling. So while the number of users was increasing, great, the amount of usage by the new customers was not so strong. So people have this mentality of one and done, try it, then forget about it. They really had to make sure that the whole company understood that consistent and sustained utilization is paramount. So they put a lot of effort and resources towards solving this. And here's what they did. So the first thing was that they reinvigorated their user base to treat more. Now, again, wouldn't that be wonderful? It's not just that simple. How do you do that? Well, that they asked their user base, again, longstanding users, new users, et cetera, what is the value of our product? Where do you see it fit the best? What kind of patients do you use our technology for? Again, all within the approved indications, they started to document all the different parameters so that they created this wonderful patient selection criteria tool. And where possible, they would even assign a particular patient type a case study and a user who avidly uses the technology on that type of a patient scenario, so that, again, as a user, I could reach out to a colleague of mine and ask, hey, I see that you use this technology for this type of a patient situation, tell me more. And so they kind of help facilitate that peer-to-peer discussion. So that was a first checkbox that they did, which was great. The other thing that they did was they really put in the hands of the sales team a new tool to explain and secure commitment from new users. So what this was called by the customer's analogy was a roadmap to success. And it built off of that visual of a roadmap where you start here and there's points along the way and you end there. And so they built this tool, and the tool showed, from interest early on, maybe a hands-on workshop, maybe proctoring, attending, some sort of a live case, and then, using yourself, becoming proficient, all the way to a level of mastery where you're a thought leader and you're a host and you're a proctor and all that as show site. And they explained the sales team now with this tool could sit down with a new prospective customer and say, hey, this is about making sure this technology is available in this market. it requires commitment from you. We don't just provide this technology and then that's done. We want to make sure that along the way, you're making noise in the market along with us to explain that this new technology exists and patients seek it out, and referring physicians know that it exists through you. And so this roadmap to success, just a visual, just a picture really with some narrative, but the sales team would actually have the customers, the prospective customers, sign it and say, I'm up for it. I'm committed to this program that you've outlined. And while not contractual, it was more psychological that, they've expressed their commitment to the program. So that was a big boon for them in terms of new users coming on board already had clear expectations about what was required of them to make the program successful. The third thing that was really critical was that, again, utilization maybe at the department level, the per patient level was waning. That's why there was a focus on utilization. So they elevated the importance of this technology and what it did for the hospital to the department level, to the hospital level, to the system level. So as you all might know, IHI quadruple aim. If you're not, that consists of 4 things. The customer tied their technology and how it contributed to improvements or reinforcements for these 4 quadruple aims of the IHI. That's the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, if you don't know. So it's improving clinician experience, saving them time, reducing their stress and burnout. It's better outcomes, again, pretty straightforward, better clinical outcomes, lowering the costs of the procedure through this technology, and improving the patient experience, less pain, less morbidity, quicker return to normal lifestyle, et cetera. So they tied their technology into improving those and reinforcing those, which were major hospital and health system initiatives. So again, that was pushing their technology up at a level where the CEO and the chief nursing officer, medical officer were vested in the utilization at the patient level. So it wasn't just a bottoms up kind of focus, but a top down. So that encouraged utilization. All that to say that in the end, the outreach to the patients and through the cooperative marketing toolkit and things that Lauren had mentioned, the tie into the IHI initiatives, the roadmap for better commitment, and again, the patient selection criteria, all these things blended together to where in the end result was acquisition within about 12 months of initiating some of these programs. So again, a successful outcome for them. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Lisa. We are now going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. Lisa, I know you're monitoring the questions.
Yes, so let me look here and see. I don't see any in the Q&A box, which is fine. If you want to type something in the chat, that's fine, but also in the Q&A would be helpful. So from the chat, I know you addressed, will the recording be made available and slides? Yes, it'll be sent to all registrants. Okay, great. Okay, here's one. So launching pre-revenue, what would you do differently? So I assume that means that their situation is different. They're not going all the way through to commercial launch themselves where they're generating revenue. So the question is, how would all of this that we've been talking about, the 3 must-haves, pertain to their situation? Lauren?
Yeah, so really, if that's your strategy, you're going to have a 1 must-have, and that is building your brand and that foundation. And when you do that, I think that this acquiring companies value checklist will be very helpful to you as well. But making sure that your policies, your procedures are all shored up, you have the right team in place, that you have an understanding of the viability and the market share that you'll have as a company, and that you're also very easily able to and effectively able to articulate that to strategics, to investors. You're being mindful of the external optics as well. So what are you doing from a PR standpoint? What are you doing from a thought leadership standpoint? That is all still very, very critical, regardless, if you're going to do must-haves number 2 and 3 or not. Number 1 is where you need to maintain your focus.
Great. Next one is sort of in a similar vein. It seems like somebody's not the typical pathway that we're talking about here. It says not planning to be acquired, maybe going to go public later. We're going to go it alone for now. Are these must-haves necessary?
Yeah, I'll take that. All of these must-haves are still absolutely necessary if you're not looking to be acquired. These are just good business principles. And something else that is important too is that as you grow and as you're expanding, the target on your back expands as well. So making sure everything is shored up from a compliance standpoint and that your foundation is built and you're able to effectively sell and scale is going to be very important as you start to get that momentum in the market.
Great. Some others are coming in, which is good. So next one up is, what if we don't know which KOLs are best to align with? And I'm going to assume that that means that you're very early on in the process, because KOL alignment is one of those early must-haves as you build your, your foundation. Lauren, do you want to take that, or you want me to field that one?
Lisa, will you field that one?
Sure. So if you don't know who the thought leaders are, maybe it's because, you've got this technology and you're entering into a new healthcare vertical that you're not familiar with. That's fine. Or you want to make sure that among the KOLs that you have available, you pick the right ones. And that can be a little tricky. It certainly can be, a risk to make sure that you're aligned with the right ones. But here's the key is that the process is fairly straightforward. We actually do what we call a KOL landscape for you. If you're interested, we can talk a little bit more about that offline. But the idea is, who's authoring the most, who's posting the most in, blogs and forums and social media, et cetera, who's publishing the most posters and podium presentations at conferences, all of those things. Who's the most visible about this disease state? Sure, they might be a cardiologist, a gastroenterologist, an internal medicine, whatever their specialty is, that's fine. But, they probably have chosen a couple of paths that they go really deep into. Who are those people? Look at them, understand their alliances. Now, these days, it's pretty easy to get insight from like a payer claims database about Sunshine Act reporting. That's all publicly available. So you can see a physician and who they are compensated by, how much and what for. So that kind of data is available, I know, through our subscriptions to MedScout and Alpha Sophia. It shows that kind of data. Bottom line is, make sure that they're not already aligned with somebody who's a competitor that you're going after, because obviously that might not work well. Or you could choose to do that because that could be strategic. If you could win them over to your technology, all the better. So again, there's ways to discover who these people are that would make your list, and then to analyze who they are and figure out which is the best one. I have a red flag, though, that I want to share after doing this for so many years, is that, if someone comes to you and says, I want to help you, I want to be a speaker for you, I want to, be a show site for you, and you have this discussion about what that would entail, and they're looking for you to be a secondary income or a supplemental income for them, be mindful that that's a big red flag. That's not what your goal is, mutual goal at all, is to provide somebody a secondary income. So if they're saying, hey, my hourly rate is $1,000 an hour, back away. We typically counsel people to have 2 levels of an hourly rate, $400 for the most senior experienced physician out there, and $250 for a less experienced, more junior physician. And those are backed by the MGMA, which is the salary standards guidelines that come out every year from MGMA. So again, I just would say, let that be a red flag for you in your KOL selection.
Thank you, Lisa. I
Yeah.
see actually a couple more questions.
Okay.
So we primarily focus on cash pay customers, as reimbursement for our technology is at least 2 years out. We see more and more clinicians shifting to cash pay model. Do you see the same thing? And is there anything specific that you see we should be doing different from what you presented today?
That's a good one. I would have to give some more thought to that. I don't think off the top of my head I have a strong answer, but we could get that answered certainly in our follow-up. I know that it is a model where again a user of your technology, or actually I think we're talking about patients. That's the clarity I would need. Did the patients pay cash to use to be the recipient of the technology? The physicians just buy it outright, no reimbursement. I'm just trying to make sure I follow that thought. So if you want to clarify, that would be good while we jump to another question.
Okay, so this one is a great one, and I know one that it's been actually buzzed recently, but it's what media works well with MedTech customers for sharing the proposition or facilitating P2P engagement.
Proposition or facilitating. So, well, again, I think some people, Lauren, you could argue this with me too about, social media has its place. I think that when you're trying to, stimulate a physician to talk to a colleague of theirs, that social media is a smart strategy. That's certainly, when you talk about media, that's what I would interpret it. I think a lot of times we tend to go maybe more old school route, and it is ensuring that we as the company are hosting workshops, webinars where somebody is lecturing on their utilization, the disease state, interesting case studies, and that we're inviting their peers to attend. Those are kind of some of the things that come to mind, or hands-on workshops in person. Proctoring helps as well. If you've got someone genuinely interested, I mean, again, it depends on the level of the funnel they're at. If you're just trying to build interest, at the top of the funnel, then yeah, a webinar might be appropriate just to get more people interested in looking at your technology. If it's further down the funnel and it's more of how do I move this one person to close, then it might be a little more one-on-one with, a call with a leading physician, a show site visit, a headquarter visit, things like that. Lauren, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think also virtual roundtables can be very effective as well. Making sure that we're positioning these users, these physicians as thought leaders and asking them to share their insights with their peers, I think is a good way to engage with them. And then also just from a media standpoint too, if we're talking about social media, we don't always have to go with the traditional platforms. There are, HCP specific platforms to drive engagement and to generate conversation between physicians that can be leveraged. And, we have several of those. And so I can follow up with you with some more information on that. But there's a lot of different nuances. There's a lot of different options. I would just say maybe look outside the box a little bit if you're wanting to facilitate engagement to these different platforms or to customized interactions with your customers.
Okay, Scott, you want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so Scott, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, actually, we've had several of our customers who are in the imaging space, who have technology that does not have, it's a new modality, and so it's not got reimbursement. I'm just going to draw a parallel here. It's not got reimbursement. It's of tremendous value, though, to the patient. So the cost for the investment in the technology needs to be financed in some way, right? So if there's no reimbursement, then they're looking to patients to say, hey, you're being looked at, and an imaging procedure is being done to assess, are you at risk? Aren't you at risk? Is there something there? Is there not something there? And, it's enhanced because of your, genetics, or it's, dense breasts as one example. There's all these different things that might make it really make sense for the patient. Now, out of the gate, you might get more affluent patients to say, yes, I'll pay for that extra expertise, that AI, something that the doctor and the facility aren't getting reimbursed for, but that help to, again, drive revenue for the customer of yours to make the model for return on investment make sense. So yeah, it's not out of the question. It can be done. It starts with, again, more the top tier patients who have good insurance, but also have the means to supplement that with a higher out of pocket as necessary. So that's a solid strategy. Again, reimbursement, some people think you just magically wake up one night, you've got your FDA clearance, then the next day you've got reimbursement. It doesn't work that way unless you're coming in under a predicate device that's all buttoned up, and you're going to do the exact same thing. If you want reimbursement, it's a process, and the process comes from utilization of your technology. It doesn't just happen overnight. It has to be built. So again, the market expects the impossible, that you can't just overnight have reimbursement. So you have to think of clever ways to supplement in the short term and make that make sense. So hopefully that gives you some level of an answer, Scott.
Yeah, and I see there's another point in there about a service sales model. This is something that we work with frequently. We're very comfortable with. I'd welcome to have a in-person or over the phone discussion with you after this, but from what we've seen and feedback from hospital leadership, facility leadership, investors, strategics, having that kind of sales model is an attractive offer.
Yeah, Scott, I would just say again, it's funny, but what you describe parallels again our work with imaging providers. And again, maybe that's not what you do, but it'd be interesting to take that offline and just share a little bit more, specifics about those clients of ours and what did they do, because you're right, that was another part of their approach, was that that we aren't going to have you acquire our technology by a big capital outlay. There is a pay-per-click or a more reasonable way to where they're not taking such a high risk in investing in your technology, but becoming a user nonetheless. So that's a good one. Maybe we can take that offline. I have one more, Lauren, and then we'll just table it. We are at time. Okay, that's fine. We'll make sure that all questions from webinar 1 and webinar 2 are addressed in writing and made available to everybody. Thank you.
So thank you guys for bearing with us here as we are already at 12 Eastern. We just want to make sure that we're making this actionable with additional resources. So you are going to get the What Acquiring Companies Value checklist. Should you book a discovery call with Lisa and myself, you'll be getting a free copy of her book. So you're launching a medical device, which has a lot of great content on supporting your sales team with the right tools. And then you'll also be getting our checklist for ways to increase utilization from your existing customer base. All right, thank you all so much for attending. Again, appreciate you hanging in here with us a minute after the top of the hour, and we look forward to connecting with you after the webinar, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.